I thought it was a prank call, but when I checked the doorbell camera footage, I realized the truth. I was never alone that night. It started as any other quiet evening with the hum of the fridge and the faint clinking sound of my keys when I tossed them onto the kitchen counter. I had just returned from work, alone in my apartment since my roommates were away visiting their families for the weekend. My apartment was one of those typical New York City rentals, small, cramped, but enough to get by. I didn't mind the solitude. It gave me time to relax, catch up on shows, and maybe cook a decent meal for myself. I remember that night clearly. It was the night that I realized how dangerous loneliness can truly be. It all began around midnight. I was sprawled out on the couch, scrolling through my phone when the first call came in. The number was unknown, and I almost didn't pick up. I should have ignored it. I should have. But for some strange reason, I answered. "Hello," I said, groggy, expecting some kind of marketing scam or a wrong number. There was a long silence before the voice came through, distorted, almost like it was underwater. "Are you alone?" I laughed at first. It was definitely one of my friends playing a prank. We had done it to each other countless times in the past. I even half expected one of my roommates, Rob, to burst out laughing from the other end of the line. "Ha ha, very funny," I said, trying to mask the unease that was beginning to settle in my stomach. "Who is this?" There was a pause, followed by another question. "Are you really alone?" The voice was still garbled, but it was undeniably familiar. I couldn't place it at first, but there was something unsettling about it. I shook it off. Probably some random number from one of those stupid apps people use to disguise their voices. But the next thing threw me off completely. A sound, a faint tapping. It was coming from my front door. I froze. What the hell? The voice from the phone seemed to mock my confusion. "Do you hear that?" I looked at the phone screen, expecting some kind of clue, but all I saw was the same unknown number staring back at me. I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my heart racing. Tap, tap, tap. I slowly got up from the couch, my feet dragging on the wooden floor. The tapping was louder now, like someone was gently knocking. I glanced toward the door, the dim light from the hallway seeping under the cracks. There was no one there. I slowly walked toward the door, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I stood there for a moment, listening. No more knocking, just silence. But I felt watched. It's hard to describe, but it was like something wasn't right. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. No response. Just the same unsettling silence. I glanced back at my phone and, feeling ridiculous, ended the call. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. Probably just some stupid prank. But then the calls kept coming. Each time they were worse than the last. The same distorted voice asking the same questions. "Are you alone? Who's there with you? Can you hear me?" I started to panic. Who could this be? Why was this happening? I checked the time. It was already 1:30 a.m. I sat back down on the couch, trying to calm myself, but the atmosphere in my apartment felt off. The air felt heavier, colder. I glanced toward the front door again. That nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I pulled myself together and decided to check the doorbell camera. It was something I rarely did usually. My camera just sat there collecting dust. But I had an odd gut feeling that maybe, just maybe, it might offer some clarity. I opened the app on my phone and stared at the footage. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The little timestamp ticked along, showing that nothing was amiss, but then, there it was. A figure, standing right in front of my door. I blinked. My breath caught in my throat. I zoomed in. The figure was hard to make out, just a silhouette standing still. It was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled up over its head. I felt a chill run through my body. I hadn't heard anyone knock. I hadn't heard anyone approach the door. How long had they been standing there? I watched the figure for what seemed like hours. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, staring at the camera. At first, I told myself it was probably just someone messing around, someone who was lost or trying to catch a glimpse into the window. But the longer I watched, the more my doubt grew. I checked my phone again. The time had passed another hour, and the figure was still there. The tension was unbearable. Then, without warning, the figure moved. It didn't walk up to the door. It shifted, almost as if it was gliding toward the entrance. And then it pressed itself against the window, its face just inches away from the glass. I gasped. It wasn't just standing there anymore. It was watching me. I felt a surge of terror. My hands shook as I fumbled to press record on my phone. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself this was a trick, a prank, something inside me knew deep down that it wasn't. I moved back from the door and locked it. I stood in the middle of my living room trying to breathe. My heart was thumping so loudly in my chest, I felt like it was about to explode. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, a bang that rattled the window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I pulled the curtains back cautiously, just enough to see what was happening. The figure had moved closer. It was now right by the window, banging its fist against the glass, over and over. Bang, bang, bang. I stared in horror. My mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. The banging was relentless, maddening. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was watch as this thing continued its assault on my home. And then it stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. I rushed to my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I dialed Rob's number. "Come on, pick up. Please, pick up," I muttered to myself as the phone rang. Nothing. I tried calling a few more times, but he wasn't answering. Not Rob. Not anyone. I thought I was losing my mind. Just as I was about to give up, something in the corner of my eye caught my attention. I turned, just in time to see the door handle slowly turn. The hair on my arm stood on end. I didn't move. I couldn't move. The handle twisted again, this time more forcefully. The door shook. It was like someone was trying to get in. I grabbed the nearest object, a kitchen knife, and held it in my shaking hands, my back pressed against the wall. My entire body was frozen in terror. The door rattled, and then bang, another knock. But this one was louder, harsher. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know who was out there. I had to confront it. I slowly crept to the door, staring through the peephole, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. For a moment, I didn't believe what I saw. It was him. It was Rob. But Rob was supposed to be hundreds of miles away. He was supposed to be visiting his family. My stomach dropped, and a cold sweat formed on my brow. This wasn't possible. I whispered his name, my voice barely audible. "Rob?" I reached for my phone again, but just as I did, I heard the voice from the phone call. "Let me in." My blood ran cold. It was Rob's voice, but distorted. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not alone. The truth that night, what I learned hours later when the police arrived, was something I could never have predicted. It wasn't Rob outside my door. It wasn't anyone I knew. But it was someone who knew me, and someone who had been watching me for longer than I realized. The face in the hoodie had been a reflection of someone from my past, someone I'd long since forgotten. But now, that person was here, and they were never leaving. It was a typical Thursday night. I had spent most of the evening wrapped in the comfort of my couch, a bowl of microwaved popcorn on the coffee table, and the soft hum of Netflix filling the quiet space. I lived alone, a choice I made after a few failed relationships that left me better off by myself. The silence was welcome. I had no one to answer to except myself. Dinner was a small luxury I didn't often indulge in. But that evening, the mood hit me. I was tired, and the idea of cooking was less inviting than the thought of just ordering something. Something greasy, something familiar, something easy. I quickly ordered from my favorite place, a burger joint around the corner, and settled in to wait. The evening stretched on. The show I was watching seemed endless, the clock ticking in the background. Eventually, I heard the soft ding from my phone. "Your order is out for delivery." An hour later, I received the expected knock. I pulled myself up, stretching before I made my way to the door. The delivery was later than usual, but I wasn't bothered. The doorbell chimed again, short, rapid rings. I frowned. It was well past 9 p.m. and the night had grown darker, colder. When I opened the door, there was the delivery man. His posture was stiff and his face was oddly blank, though he did smile a bit. The grin didn't reach his eyes. It was too wide, too forced. He held a large cardboard box, more like a crate, really. It wasn't what I was expecting. But maybe they'd just packed my food in something bigger, I thought. I froze, unsure what to say. "I've got your order here," the man said, voice rough, almost mechanical. "You signed for this earlier." He handed me the box, and I instinctively reached for it, but something felt off. His grip was stronger than it should have been, too insistent. I glanced up at him. His face was pale, unnervingly so. He looked as though he hadn't slept in days. "I never signed for anything," I said, pulling the box a little away from him, my brow furrowing in confusion. "I ordered food, not a box." The man didn't back off. His eyes narrowed, his lips tightening. "You did. You signed for it." I shook my head. "No, I didn't. I didn't order anything else." His gaze grew colder, harder, as he stepped forward into my personal space. "You signed for it. I'm not leaving until you take it." A wave of unease crept up my spine. The man's presence, his words, they were too deliberate, too strange. I wanted to tell him to leave, to slam the door in his face, but something about the way he held his ground made my heart thud painfully in my chest. I finally sighed in frustration. "Fine, just leave it and go." Without waiting for another word, I stepped back and let him push the box into my arms. His grip tightened for a moment before he let go. I didn't slam the door, but I shut it with a deliberate thud. The click of the latch was final. I leaned against the door for a moment, eyes closed, breathing heavily. What the hell just happened? I shook my head, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling settling over me. I glanced down at the box in my hands, still confused. It was heavy, too heavy for just food. The cardboard felt cold to the touch. With a sigh, I decided I had no other choice but to open it. I pulled out a small serrated knife from my kitchen drawer and began to slice through the tape. The cardboard peeled back with ease, revealing the contents inside. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't quite place why. Nestled in the box were stacks of old photographs, carefully arranged and stacked on top of one another. My breath caught in my throat. These weren't just random pictures. They were of me, from different stages in my life. Some were from when I was a child, others from my teenage years, some from a few months ago. The memories came flooding back, each photo pulling me deeper into the mounting anxiety building in my chest. I picked up one of the photos. I was in it barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater, standing in front of a small shop, smiling. It was a picture from a trip I had taken alone years ago. I hadn't thought about it in ages. I was about to flip it over to see who had taken it when I noticed something else. There was a photo beneath it, another one of me, much more recent. I was sitting on my couch, curled up in a blanket, the glow of the TV screen illuminating my face. I looked so relaxed, so unaware. How did someone get this? I felt the blood drain from my face. There were more photos, and with each one, the horror grew. There I was, standing in front of my apartment building, looking up at the sky, the camera angled from a distance. Then, another of me, walking down the street again from a distance. The last one was the worst. It was me lying in my own bed, sound asleep. It had been taken just a few hours ago. The photo was so clear, so intimate, that I froze. It was taken while I was sleeping. My heart raced, panic rising in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I was no longer alone. A shadow flickered across the window. I whipped my head toward the glass. There, standing just outside, his face pressed against the window, was the delivery man. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and then, without a word, he smiled, a cold, twisted smile. I jumped back, dropping the photos onto the floor. My body shook as I stumbled toward the door, my mind screaming at me to get away from the window. My eyes flicked back to the man. He hadn't moved. He just stood there, watching me, unblinking. What the hell was happening? I backed up into the kitchen, my body tense, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The man's image was burned into my mind, and I could feel my stomach churn in disgust. The phone. I needed to call the police. My trembling hands fumbled for my phone. As soon as I dialed 911, the phone rang out in an odd echo. It wasn't the usual sound. It was wrong. It was more like a low hum. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen. I swiped it away, only to see another notification. A text message had come through. It was from an unknown number. I tapped on it. "I'm watching you." My pulse roared in my ears. I turned back to the window, and the man was still there, his eyes now locked on mine. The smile had faded, replaced by something more unsettling, something darker. It was as though he could see straight through me, reading every part of my soul. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't move. A loud knock echoed from the door, startling me. The man had moved. I jumped. My phone slipped from my grasp and clattered onto the floor. Another knock. "Thud. Please," the man said, his voice low but somehow carrying a weight that made my skin crawl. "Don't make me wait. I have something for you." I backed away from the door, heart racing as I thought of my options, but it was too late. I could already hear the faint creaking of the door handle turning. I was trapped. The door opened. I didn't even hear him move. When I turned to face the man again, his face was inches from mine. His breath was foul, heavy, his eyes empty. "I told you. You signed for it." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Everything felt like it was collapsing around me. And that's when I realized the package wasn't for me. It was for someone else. The setting is quiet, unassuming. A small rented house tucked away on a quiet street in a suburban neighborhood. The house seems innocent enough. The college student Anna stands in front of the window, staring out at the gently swaying trees. Her roommates are away for the week, and while she's been looking forward to a break, there's an unease gnawing at the edges of her comfort. This is supposed to be peaceful, just a week of me time. She sighs, setting her books down, glancing at the empty house around her. She takes a deep breath, trying to push away the creeping feeling that something's off. She's been hearing odd noises throughout the house, faint creaks and whispers, but she chalks it up to the house settling. The clock reads 7:32 p.m. Anna is in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner when she hears it. Knock, knock. The sound is sharp and deliberate, a deep thud echoing through the silence. It's unsettling, though it's not uncommon to hear knocks on the door in the neighborhood, but the timing feels wrong. Anna hesitates, wiping her hands on a towel, her heart starting to pick up pace. She walks toward the door, peering through the peephole, only to find no one. She frowns. She could have sworn someone was out there. Anna, to herself, nervous laugh. Must be the wind or something. She opens the door cautiously, stepping onto the porch, looking left and right, but the street is empty. There's nothing. As she stands there, her breath catches. The air feels too still, too quiet. The only thing that's odd is a faint trail of muddy footprints leading from the edge of her yard toward the backyard where the tree line begins. Her pulse quickens. It's not just a few footprints, but a clear, deliberate path, as if someone had been standing there watching. The wet mud on the prints glistens under the fading evening light, as though it's fresh. Anna, whispering, "Who could have left these?" Panic begins to set in. Her instincts scream that something's wrong. She quickly slams the door shut and locks it, moving toward the other locks on the house. She checks the windows, pulling the curtains tight, trying to convince herself that it's just some prank. But the feeling of being watched grows stronger, like a cold hand brushing against her neck. The night feels oppressive, as if the house itself is holding its breath. Anna locks every door, closes every window, but she can't shake the feeling that someone is nearby, watching. Around 11:30 p.m., Anna is in bed, the sheets tangled around her legs as she stares at the ceiling, listening for any sign of movement outside. The room is dark except for the dim glow from the street lamp outside, which flickers every few seconds. Then, just as she begins to drift off, she hears it again. Knock, knock, knock. It's louder this time, almost urgent. A chill runs down her spine. She jumps out of bed, heart pounding in her chest. She rushes to the window, her hands trembling as she draws the curtains back. The figure is standing at the door. A tall man, his face obscured by the darkness, but she can see his posture unnervingly still. He's smiling, a slow, wide grin that stretches across his face, revealing unnaturally white teeth against the backdrop of the night. Anna, whispering, horrified, "Who are you?" She stumbles back from the window, feeling dizzy. She can barely breathe. Who is this man? Why is he just standing there? She tries to peer through the window again, but he's gone. In a heartbeat, he's disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Anna forces herself to go about her routine, though a gnawing fear lingers. She convinces herself it was just a bad dream. She's alone, and maybe she's just letting her imagination run wild. She takes a walk to the grocery store to clear her head, but the sense of dread never quite leaves. As she returns, she spots him again, the man from the night before, but this time it's daylight. The sun is high, and there's no mistaking him. He's standing at the edge of the yard, staring directly at her through the window. This time, he's not hiding in the shadows. He's not trying to blend in, he's just watching her. She can feel his eyes like they're boring into her soul. "Anya," loudly with rising panic, "who are you? What do you want from me?" The man doesn't move. He just stands there, still, his unnerving smile never wavering. After what feels like an eternity, he tilts his head slightly as if acknowledging her question. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he answers, "Man, calmly, "I used to live here. This was my family's home, and I've been waiting for you." Scene 6. The neighbor's history. The man slowly steps forward, walking toward the porch with deliberate slowness. Anna backs up, fear freezing her every movement. Anna, nervously, voice cracking, "Who are you? Why are you here?" The man smiles again, his eyes glinting with something far darker than what a stranger should hold. "Man, my family used to live in this house. A long time ago, before they disappeared." Anna can barely process the words. There's something deeply unsettling about the way he speaks. It's almost like he's reliving something that hurt him, but something he's also obsessed with. Anna, shaking. "What happened to them? Where did they go?" Man, smiling more broadly. "They didn't leave. Not really. They're still here, somewhere. And you will be too, eventually." Anna's heart races. She can't even process the implications of what he's saying. Her gut twists into knots, and every instinct screams at her to run, to escape. But she's rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the terror in his words. The next few days feel like a blur. Anna avoids the house as much as she can, staying in public places. But every time she returns, there he is watching from the edge of the yard, lurking in the shadows. At night, the knocks come again, and this time she's sure of it. They're getting closer. There's no denying the growing presence of something malicious, something that has been waiting for her for far too long. Anna, panicking to herself, "I need to leave. I need to get out of here." She packs her things, trying to leave, but when she goes to the door, it won't open. It's locked. She checks the windows, but they won't budge. It's as though the house itself has closed her in, trapping her within its walls. Suddenly, she hears footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from behind her. Slowly, she turns around. There, standing in the doorway of the room, is the man. But this time, his smile is gone. His face is blank, almost hollow, as though he's completely given himself over to whatever darkness lingers here. "Man," his voice low and guttural, "you can't leave. You belong here now." The room feels colder now, a stark chill seeping into her bones as the man steps closer. His footsteps echo like a countdown, each one more ominous than the last. Anna's body freezes, her mind racing, desperate for an escape that she knows isn't coming. She tries the door again, but it's no use. The knob is as solid as stone, and no amount of force will make it budge. Her heartbeat grows louder, drowning out her thoughts as she feels the weight of his gaze pressing on her from all directions. Anna, frantic, almost pleading, "Please, let me out. I don't know what you want, but I'm not who you think I am." The man doesn't speak. He simply stands there, that unnerving smile creeping back onto his face. His eyes, once seemingly human, are now empty, hollow voids, like there's nothing left inside but darkness. "Man," softly, almost hypnotically, "I know exactly who you are. You are just like them, like my family, like everyone who's come before you." Anna's mind begins to reel. Her breath quickens, her hands trembling as she tries to find any shred of clarity. She remembers his words from the first day, the way he said, "This was my family's home." He didn't just mean he used to live here. He meant something more, something much worse. Anya, shaking, whispering, "What do you mean? What happened to your family?" His smile falters for the briefest moment, a flicker of pain flashing across his face before the mask of calm returns. "Man, they vanished. They were taken by this place, by something that's been living here for years. It's hungry, always waiting. It feeds on the people who come. And when you're here long enough, it consumes you, changes you. He steps forward, his shadow growing across the room. I was the last one left, watching, waiting, hoping for someone to come back. The man's voice is growing more intense, more desperate, like he's reliving some dark memory. He's no longer just a person, he feels like an embodiment of the house's twisted history. Anna backs away, eyes wide with fear, but there's nowhere to go. Anna, backing into a corner, nearly in tears. Why me? Why now? Why are you doing this? The man's eyes flash with a mix of bitterness and sorrow, his hand rising slowly, as though pulling something from the air itself. His fingers twitch with a nervous energy, almost as if he can't help himself. He looks like he's caught between two realities, the one he once lived in, and the one that's now consuming him. Man, almost mournfully, because you're here, Anna. You're just like the others. They all thought they could leave, but once you're in, you can't leave. You become part of this house. The house needs you. Suddenly, a loud, bone-rattling bang echoes through the walls, as if something deep within the house is waking up. Anna's heart skips a beat, and she turns toward the sound, only to see the walls beginning to pulse, as if alive. The house is breathing. She knows now, without a doubt, that it was never just the man she had to fear. The house is alive, and it wants her. The man's expression shifts again, more erratic this time, and his lips curl into a wide, grotesque grin. He takes another step toward her, his voice now a whisper, a rasp that sends chills down her spine. Man, whispering with urgency, you can't escape it. You belong here. You'll see what it's like. The walls shudder once more, and for a brief moment, the entire house seems to groan in response, as though it recognizes the tension in the air. Anna feels the ground beneath her feet shift, as if the house is rearranging itself. The air grows thick, heavy with the stench of mildew, rot, and something far worse. With trembling hands, Anya grabs at the nearest object, a broken lamp on a side table, and swings it at him. The force of the impact sends him stumbling back, but he doesn't seem hurt. In fact, he laughs a low, guttural sound that only adds to the nightmare, laughing darkly. You really think that will stop me? She rushes for the window, desperate to break free, but the glass won't shatter. It's as if the house is protecting him, protecting itself. Every attempt she makes to escape is met with resistance, as though the walls are actively working to keep her trapped. Her hands are slick with sweat, her chest tightening. The house, the man, it's all closing in. She feels the walls pressing down on her, the floor shifting beneath her feet. Her vision blurs, and she knows in her heart that she's losing herself to whatever force haunts this place. In one final desperate attempt to escape, Anna runs toward the back door, hoping for any chance of freedom. She opens it, expecting to see the backyard, but instead, it's a swirling black void, a rift in the very fabric of reality. Her breath catches, and she steps back, horrified. The man appears behind her, his smile widening once more. Man, whispering, almost tenderly, "It's too late now. Welcome home, Anna." Anna stumbles backward, falling to the floor as the darkness of the void begins to consume her. Her hands stretch out to grasp at anything, but there's nothing, only the hollow, endless blackness that seems to reach for her, pulling her in. Her last thought before everything fades away is the realization that she wasn't just the latest victim, she was part of the house now. She had become its next offering. Scene 12. The empty house. The house is quiet once more. The door swings open, and the man steps outside. He looks around the yard, his eyes scanning the horizon as if waiting for something. From the shadows of the house, a faint whisper can be heard. voice, whispering faintly, "Another one." The man smiles again, his eyes gleaming with a strange satisfaction. He turns away from the house, disappearing into the distance. Behind him, the house stands still, waiting, hungry.